Welcome everybody again to the Beer America podcast, Beer Money America.
I
There you
see the
go.
number you talked
The left
about this
kick.
last week.
It pops in and out all the time. I never know. It's like, hey, yeah, yeah. Anyways, how's it going? You're back from LA, back home. It's always good to be home, right?
Yeah. Very good to be home.
Yeah,
Yeah, I got to go to LA quite a bit, and I don't mind, going back and forth between LA and Vista too much,
yeah,
but it's nice to be back in Vista.
yeah. Well, I'm up in Washington State,
Mm.
just about 30 miles south of the Canadian border. So the weather's a little different up here, but it makes me, I'll tell you, I appreciate the people who live up here. Talk about a hardy bunch of folks. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm driving around yesterday and like going by schools and stuff, and it's just slightly drizzling. Kids are out in the playground. It's like, whatever, no big deal. Most of them, barely wear a sweatshirt, and I got my down jacket on, of course.
Yeah.
And we're, you know, well, yeah, I mean, you've lived in cold weather, so you're probably used to it.
Yeah.
But I'm such a wimp. I mean, living in
Well,
Southern California, it's
when
ridiculous.
when it comes to cold weather, I have one story that I always have to tell because just remembering it cracks me up. So, born and raised in Southern California, used to the warm weather. And then, for whatever reason, I decided to go to college in Maine.
Right.
So, as far away as you can go, absolutely cold. So it starts to get to be the fall, and it gets gray and dark and cold. And I'm just like, wow, the weather here is it's awful. The sun never comes out, and even when it does, it sets at 4. Awful. And then one day in the middle of January, I wake up, and it is a glorious day, beautiful, bright sunshine. And in my mind, Southern California kid, bright sunshine equals warm.
Right.
So I throw on my t-shirt, my shorts, I get ready. I'm going outside. I'm gonna spend the whole day outside because it's so nice. And I walked out and it was like 10 degrees. Because when
Right.
it's clear, that's when it's actually the coldest. And I
Coldest.
just I, I just remember walking out of the dorms and standing on the stoop of the building and just being like, why is the sun not warm? There's no warmth coming from the sun.
Yep.
What's going on?
Yep.
So that was the first time that I ever, it was my freshman year in college, and it was the first time that I saw a sunny day in winter. And it took me a long time to wrap my head around the fact that
I
it could be
know.
sunny and cold.
I know. I know. It's crazy how quickly we, even people that have gone from cold climates to Southern California or Arizona or whatever, how quickly they acclimate to, I don't like cold weather anymore.
Oh, yeah.
But people that live here, like most of the people I talk to up here, they love it. My daughter, I'm up here helping her out. And she's a Southern California girl and she loves it. She'll never come home. I don't think this is her place. So it's like, hey, whatever floats your boat. But she's trying to get us to move up here. It's like, yeah, it's not gonna
Nah.
nah, nah. It's the plane trip is not that bad. So
Well, it's funny that we were talking about weather because one of the things that was actually on my mind to talk about, and it's kind of offbeat, was I was looking back through some geology stuff, and there's a theory out there about the beginnings of the origin of life on Earth, and there was this period of time which was called Snowball Earth. And it's a theory. I mean, it's
yeah,
there's conjecture. There's a lot of evidence to support it, but it's not 100% known. But basically, the idea is that there was a period of time about 700 million years ago where the entire planet was covered in ice.
mhm,
Because it had just cooled down, and then eventually the cooling stopped and abated, and things started to warm up again, and the ice melted. But I was interested in it because we have there's so much talk about climate change and
right.
carbon and why things do what they did, and so there isn't a consensus really on why it really cooled down. Because my thought was sort of about it was it would be interesting to know why you could cool the whole planet down that much. Because if you can cool the planet down that much and you can figure out how to do it, then you could just go ahead and do it. But one of the theories about why it got cool was that volcanoes were releasing a lot of sulfur compounds into the
Hmm.
atmosphere. So I'm trying to remember. I think sulfur dioxide is the chemical that smells like rotting eggs.
Right.
So
Yeah.
what we could do potentially, and this is all conjecture on my part, is if we could get the planet to be smelly enough, to smell enough like rotten eggs, we could cool the whole thing down.
There
And
you
so
go.
I'm just suggesting that, again, we talked a lot about third party politics. Perhaps flooding the atmosphere with sulfur dioxide could be a third party.
Hey, why not? Um, it's funny because I've kind of lived in that world actually because several lifetimes ago we lived in South Carolina, the southern part, right across the border from Georgia, where they had a lot of paper plants.
Hmm.
And back in those days, when they were processing paper, a lot of sulfur was released, and it's the whole rotten egg smell, and it would just waft over, I mean, hundreds of miles. I mean, it was so strong, and so I've kind of experienced what that would be like, and and then technology came in. I don't think they have that issue as much anymore, but back in those days, it was like, whoa, man, you'd wake up some mornings, it was like, oh my God.
So I
Do we
take
need,
I take it you're not endorsing my plan to flood the atmosphere
well,
with
hey, if push
hydrogen
comes to
sulfide.
shove, I could live with it if it meant, we weren't going to get, burned up. But to that point, and I'm dating myself again, it seemed to me like in the 70s, like mid 70s or something, they were talking very seriously about the fear that we were going to enter another ice age.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that.
And it was like, so how did we go from that theory? And I mean, it was like, I just remember as a kid, it freaked me out thinking that, gosh, in another 10, 15 years, we might be going into an ice age the way they were talking about so seriously. We go from that to, okay, I was just reading a story yesterday that this past year has been the warmest year in 120,000 years.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, well, somebody missed the mark on that whole ice age. So they got it
Yeah.
correct. So, yeah, well, hey, I don't know. But anyways, um, first of all, I meant to send you a recipe. Have you ever had cider donuts? It's changing subjects entirely. Cider donuts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to say, I had a friend visiting a couple of weeks ago from Connecticut, and he knows that I love cider donuts. And so he actually brought some back from New York State that
Ah,
are
there you go.
pretty darn good.
Well, there was a recipe in the paper, I think it was yesterday, and I was going, well, that's the perfect compliment for you, right? I mean, have cider at dinner and stuff and have this donuts at dessert, and there you go. What are you drinking today? You did it too fast. I
Yeah, I'm
missed.
afraid it's a repeat. It's the Two Towns Marionberry cider.
Oh, okay,
So
that's
it's like
cool.
back on my wine coolers.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm up here in the Northwest, so I was trying to find something that's, uh, you know, close by. This isn't from, I mean, I'm about there's probably three breweries within walking distance of here, but I haven't had a chance to get to them. So I got Threezy does it, hazy IPA from No Lie, no, it's in Spokane. Anyways,
Nice.
the reason why I got it, let's show up. There it is. Reason why I got it is it's low calorie. So I've never had a low calorie beer before, so I thought, okay, well, it's kind of local to here and it's low calorie, so I guess I can drink twice as many of them.
Yeah, the question is, it's low calorie. Does that also mean it's low alcohol content?
I didn't see what the thing is. I'll look at that later. Uh, anyways, what else is going on? But that's really interesting about the whole geology thing because that I think there's so much every day we learn. It was like the other day they were saying NASA, whoever monitors space as far as sounds and stuff, but they got a sound from that started how long ago was it? 6 billion years ago.
Yeah.
They just received it, and that all just goes to say back to your geology point is there's so little we actually do know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just such a discovery, and it's just mind-boggling when they do uncover these things. That it's like, how they can even decipher that something started 6 billion years ago, and we are just receiving it now. I mean, it's just like
Well, as I say,
amazing.
that's astronomy, and another very interesting thing, because the
Hmm.
whole thing about the idea that the light you're seeing, coming at us from galaxies or stars
Right?
are, it's hundreds of millions,
Oh yeah.
billions of years old. And so
Hmm.
you're basically looking back in time. And
You're
so
right.
that concept is always,
I
I mean,
know.
it's fascinating.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
But going back to maybe the sulfur thing, that's that's a good launching off point because I ever since we've been doing this, one of the things that I think we've talked about from a third party perspective is really trying to understand what a third party could bring to the whole, mix of things. And, one of the things that I just kind of concluded after we've talked over these weeks is so much of what I think needs to happen is we just need to hear just more, literally smaller steps towards progress. Because
Yeah.
I didn't watch the GOP debate last night.
No, me neither.
I just I watched the first one and then it was like, okay, I can't take, and I can't really take, if there was a Democrat one, I probably wouldn't take that one either. Because one of the things that always bugs me about those is they all come in and say, in the first 100 days, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And there's no freaking way they can do any of that stuff. And I think one of the strongest things a third party could come in and say, listen, we're not going to solve all these problems tomorrow, but here are some concrete things we could do literally in the short term that would move the ball forward. And I was, we've talked about, I think we both kind of agree that, the whole, whether you're pro guns, anti guns, whatever, a good place to start is at least try to get them out of the hands of people that shouldn't have guns, as far
Right.
as through red flag laws and stuff like that. And, that actually came up this week in the Supreme Court, that's going on right now, where it sounds like they're going to kind of side towards saying, yeah, it's a reasonable expectation that somebody that's convicted of or has a restraining order against them for
Yeah.
domestic violence, that's not violating their Second Amendment rights. And so it's like, hey, let's take that step, at least it's one step towards trying to find a sensible solution to this stuff.
Yeah. No, I
And I
see.
think that's a great place for third parties to start. Those kinds of things. It's like we're not going to get rid of 400 million guns.
Yeah.
So let's don't even have that conversation. Maybe there's a conversation about, our assault rifles really, should be around, but let's even put that to the side. But one thing is, people that are going to beat other people up and,
Yeah.
abuse, their wife or husband or whatever,
Yeah. If you
probably
have it,
shouldn't have a gun.
yeah, if you have any kind of conviction or restraining order or a legal judgment against you involving violent conduct, I don't necessarily think that is
No,
you taking away a gun from a person who's already involved in violence
right,
towards others is necessarily something you could put under the Second Amendment, because I mean circumstances matter. I mean, yeah, I
absolutely.
believe in the Second Amendment and I believe in the general right of the citizens of the United States to keep and bear arms. But if you start breaking other laws, well,
Right,
you know, it's like if theoretically if you're a felon, you're not allowed to own a firearm anymore.
right,
And so that makes sense. If you're
right,
involved in criminal activity, well, you lose your right to bear
right,
arms. If you want to keep your right to bear arms, then don't go knocking over liquor stores. Don't beat up your wife. Don't
right.
be a law-abiding citizen. And then you can't have your right to keep and bear arms be infringed upon. But when you start talking about things like that, that's where I think you can actually make progress, and I think it makes a lot more
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. And so, I mean, I think it's almost like maybe it's not, maybe it's somewhat intuitive, but for a third party to basically, hey, we're not going to try and sell you this bill of goods of things we know can't happen,
Yeah,
in any term. And that could be whether you're talking as a congressperson, a senator, a president, whatever. None of that's ever going to happen that quickly. But so talk in terms of what could really truly happen in the next 2 2 to 4 years, right?
Yeah.
And so things like red flag laws, I thought, the where we kind of came out on the whole abortion thing, it was more of, okay, well, that's not working out too well for GOP right now. It seems
Yeah.
like they're kind
And
of losing hand over fist. So it's like, hey, but still, let's be reasonable about this. It's like, you know, no, a woman should have this right. And I've talked to a lot of women about this too, including my wife. And they said, hey, if it was 13, 15 weeks, no questions asked. But then after that point, it's really between you and the doctor. If there's some health issue, and I
Mhm.
think you put it that way, it's like then it becomes a health issue to determine if if it's the mom's in danger, the baby's in danger, or there's no chance of the
Right.
baby surviving. All those, then it becomes a medical issue.
But
It's
it's
not
not abortion on demand anymore. Once it becomes, when you
right.
start talking about somebody's life being in danger, that's not
Yeah,
abortion on demand. That is
right.
a medical issue. And
Exactly.
sometimes difficult decisions have to be made when it comes to
Yeah.
medical issues.
So I
But
mean,
yeah,
that
there's
seems like
actually
an
a
easy
couple.
one for third. That seems like an easy one for the a third
Yeah,
party
for
in
sure.
to really bring, because the vast majority of people it's coming out over and over believe they're women's right to choose. Now we can argue over maybe the parameters of that, but the women's right to choose is a no-brainer.
Yeah, and it's interesting because one of the things that was going on, I wasn't paying any attention to the Republican debates, but I was paying attention to some of the election results from Tuesday.
Yeah,
And, basically the Republicans got their clocks cleaned.
yeah,
And one of the reasons that it seems to have happened is that the Democrats were smart and they put some abortion legislation, on the ballot in different places. And I think Ohio was the main one that had that.
right,
And they ran a lot of ads about how, the Republican Party is, wanting to take away women's rights and, all this other
right,
stuff. It's like the Republican Party has just damned itself. It's put itself into oblivion. And I would say it's something like 10% of the population holds that view, that absolutist view
right,
about, you know, no abortion under any circumstance.
right.
And that leaves, 90% of the rest of the country available for a third party to pick up. And I just go back to that all the time. What you need is a party that can appeal to people who generally vote Republican but
Right.
aren't quote unquote Republicans, because as far as I can tell, the only thing a true Republican actually is just a crusader for anti-abortion.
Right.
And so there's this huge population of disaffected people, myself included,
Yeah.
that want you know conservatism. And
Right.
the whole position that the Republicans have on abortion, from my perspective, has always been anti-conservative. The conservative view, generally speaking, is individual rights and allowing people free of government interference to make decisions as they see fit. And
Yep.
so, you claim that that's your stance as a Republican, and then you come in, except in the case where, women don't have a right to make a decision about their opinion on pregnancy. It's like, well, wait a minute. That's completely inconsistent with everything that conservatism is
Yes.
supposed to be. So that has just always driven me up the wall. And as I say, proven over and over again, if you look at the election results,
Right. It's
no,
just a no.
the Republican Party is a third party. That's all there is to
Right.
it. It is an irrelevant party. You want to talk about throwing your vote away? Vote for the Republicans. They're ineffectual. They're unable to sustain any kind of momentum, and they have no useful policy prescriptions for anything, because
Yeah.
the only thing that unites the Republican Party is abortion.
Yeah. It's crazy. And again, like we talked about, you, whether it's the Republican Party or whatever forms that someday that kind of replaces what used to be the Republican Party,
Hmm.
that conservative voice, what I think most people would traditionally define as the conservative voice, really is needed. And but it just isn't existing. And that's where a third party could definitely represent some of those views, because even even for those who are like us, like me, that's kind of center left, no, I don't think most reasonable people aren't looking to just grow government to grow government.
Yeah.
It just, I mean, it just makes no sense. And I think we're starting to hear that more and more from a lot of disaffected Democrats
Yeah.
that, listen, these things might have been had some good intentions behind it, but now it's just ridiculous. And that was another one where I had noted for a third party on the homelessness issue, I think we both kind of came to the conclusion the best chance of resolving that is to push those solutions down to the local level and get the state out of the way, get the federal
Yeah.
government out of the way. And it was interesting because that sort of was reflected in, I was just reading an article for San Diego County where they're getting aggressive. They're going to open another center for, I think it's 100 people who are have drug issues and that sort of thing, addiction issues, but it's all going to be contained where they have their own little separate room. All the services are right there, and they're going to try it as a pilot program.
Yeah. I
And
think that's good.
and so it's like, and Jim Desmond, who is our representative for the area of North County. Um, oops, sorry about that. Oh, I got checked into Southwest Airlines. Um, he's they've all voted on it. It was like a 5-0 vote. They all voted on it. And and I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but
Yeah.
he's willing to listen to ideas, and I've come to respect him a lot more over the years. Um, but he was one of the proponents, I would say. He said, this is not the complete solution. This is one piece of the solution. For
Yeah.
this population, we know there's probably about 100 people that that will fit in here that who really do want to get off drugs and all that kind of stuff. So, but going back to that discussion, that's another third party thing that push those kind of things down to the local level as much as possible because
Yep.
that's where it's going to happen.
And that's sort of the interesting thing too, because it's I personally believe in the treatment first model. I mean, if you're dealing with drug addiction, you don't just give somebody an apartment because,
Right.
they have too many issues. They're not going to be able to maintain the apartment. If you're putting them next to people and they have addiction issues, there's all kinds of potential problems there. So creating a situation where they can get access to treatment. And then if they do well in the treatment phase, then you move into housing. So it's like bed and treatment, then housing. And I think when you do sort of disseminate things down into more of the local areas, you get more people with more ideas in more circumstances trying more things. And then when you can look back and say, hey, look, these people did something that worked and those people did something that didn't, we
Right.
should go with the thing that worked. And again, this is a really big third party thing for me because a lot of times I think you can look at different states and say, this state is doing something that's working and this state is doing something that's failing. Your better results here versus worse results there. But if it's a Democrat state versus a Republican state, and the perfect example would be right now with California and Florida at each other's throats, the two governors.
Yeah.
There's no way either one of them could look at that other state and say, hey, there are components of what's going on in one side or the other that they're going to pick up. DeSantis is
Right.
never going to adopt any good idea that Gavin might,
No.
back into. And Gavin Newsom is never going to take any
No.
ideas that seem to be working in Florida. They just can't do it.
No.
But if you had a third party governor somewhere, just randomly, Alaska,
Right.
and you said, hey, wait a minute, California has got, a transportation policy that seems to be working, and Florida seems to have a, healthcare policy that seems to be working. I'll take both of those.
Right.
Now I have two things that work. And it's like
Yeah.
you have to have somebody in the middle say, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Look, there are things that are good coming out of one
Exactly.
side or another. And then, but right now it's so, fragmented. One side has to either be completely right and the other side has to be
Right.
completely wrong. But I mean, I just don't think that's a good way to go about things.
Yeah. Well, and again, that's where I think a third party just could make so much difference. And again, uh, because there are so many independents out there already,
Yeah.
a party's important to help define and have a bit of an identity, but it's not like we have to wait for a third party. It's like as we this has been helpful for me as we're working up to the next 2024 election, being able to think through these things where I can kind of assess candidates like, okay, are they getting anywhere close to some of these points that we've been talking about,
Yeah.
Um, and if they are, the reality is there's probably not going to be a third party candidate in 2024 for them. But if they, at least if we send a message as even this ragtag group of third party people said, I mean, and they do, and I've heard this from a lot of them, and I don't think they're blowing smoke, that they really do monitor letters and emails, and that as long as they're not like form ones, that
Mhm.
if it's truly coming from somebody directly, they really do take those things into account. That if we just flood them with saying, "Hey, listen, this is great, you're doing this," but by the time the next one comes around, if you're not pushing harder on whatever the issue is, whether it's red flag laws or the homeless thing, making it more community oriented, whatever. Um, I think that that can have some impact in the short term.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
as they say, that I think that's the most difficult thing that faces people in modern politics is communication.
Yeah.
I just that's and part of the reason I'm doing this podcast is because I'm making an attempt to see what communication is possible. What communication can I make to
Right.
other people? What can I do to get some kind of a message out there and have some kind of opportunity to have people interact with it? Because like one of the things that I've been thinking about lately, and this comes to my mind all the time, is that I almost feel like we don't even speak the same language anymore. People accuse one of the things that always happens is you hear people accused of lying all the time. Somebody says something and then, oh, they're lying about this or that. And a lot of the time is it's like there's no discernment between, a person who's lying and a lie is like, intentionally saying something that's untrue. And I always say that it also has a component of, malicious component to it or, self-aggrandizing component to it. There's some self-interested component to the lie for it really to be a lie. And then other things are just making mistakes. I mean, people make mistakes or say things that are dumb all the time because they're, out of ignorance or whatever. I mean, I make mistakes, but just because you make a mistake, it doesn't mean you're lying. But
Right.
we use these derogatory terms and we to throw around at people, and it's like when you have this huge chunk of the media that your party basically controls, and obviously I mean my
Right.
my personal opinion is the Democrats that generally control the media more or less, and it's that how do you break through that? You know, right now the Republicans are the target of the Democrats and their allies in the media. So it's easy to hurl stones at them. And but even the Republicans who do have some media allies,
Yeah.
but they just don't have enough to fight back. So how does the third party break through and be able to communicate? And I think part of it is that you have to initially be kind of like a sneak attack so that nobody sees you coming, and then by the time that they focus, all their attacks against you as opposed to the Republicans, then, maybe you've got enough allies in the media that you can actually sort of have something to say. But I think that's the most daunting task. I mean, getting a
It
message
is.
out and somehow convincing people that, voting for a third party would be a good idea. That's really the tough one.
It is. And, to that point, again, it's like maybe it's just baby steps or small steps. But one of the things, and I'm sure you've done this as well, where, and I don't even spend much time on social media anymore, other than for some clients I have to deal with on some of those things. But as far as me personally, other than like doing this,
Mm.
um, I mean, social media is
No,
just
I'm
a waste of
I'm
time.
exactly I'm completely disengaged from social media.
Yeah,
I had a Facebook account for a while, but I like Instagram. I've never done Instagram. I've never tweeted.
it's
So
it's
I
just a
mean, I
dump.
just
Yeah, they're just dumpster fires. But and
yeah.
so every once in a while, somebody will post something that is just like so off the wall, and it's
Mm.
like, and they'll forward it to me like in an email or something, and it's like, okay, have you done any fact checking at all on any of this stuff? And
Yeah.
it's like, just take that one simple step. And there's ways to fact check some of this stuff. And you don't have to believe any one source. You can fact check it in a couple different places, right?
Yeah.
And the one that just I still chuckle at, I was actually out having at a wine bar here in Vista, and the server, we were just all chatting. There was a couple of us there chatting, and she went off on this thing about in Carlsbad schools. In one of the schools, they were allowing kids they had set up cat potty stations inside the kids' bathrooms because they had to, because if they identified as cats, they needed a place to go to the bathroom. And she was dead serious.
I'm
And I
sure she
said,
was.
and who told you? I said, well, I'm a friend of mine who's got knows somebody that's in the Carlsbad school system and blah blah blah. It's like, uh, have you like checked on that? I wouldn't be spreading that around. And it was this whole urban legend that's been going around for years about these schools that are setting up, you know, places
Litter
where
boxes.
go to the
Yeah.
bathroom as cats. That's like,
Yeah.
wow. It's just like, that's just crazy, you know? And it's like, but back to your point, it is, man. It's a big communications issue. So much of this just boils down to it because most people, vast majority of people agree on most issues with, the whole concentric circles, they'll overlap
Yeah.
somewhere within a reasonable place. But it's gotten so, and social media is a big part of it. I don't know. It seems like people are starting to turn against social media a little bit. I hope they are,
Yeah.
because it's just become just a big wreck.
No. And it's one of these things too where there's just it's you know there's so much of the good guys versus bad guys thing,
Yes.
depending on the team that you're on, with nothing in the middle. And
Right.
so it's like, for me, the only way to get any kind of information that you can even begin to trust is you got to look at what both sides are saying.
Right.
You got to watch left wing media and you got to listen to some right wing media,
Yep.
and where they overlap, there you can sort of try to make some decisions about what is really going on. But part of it is that you know the media from each side only reports the things that are good for their side.
Okay.
So if you're listening to one media side or the other media side, then you're not getting half of the story. So the only
Yeah.
way you can even begin to make decisions about anything is to kind of try and listen to both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that goes back to the whole idea of the third party. If you had a third party that was listening to both sides, they
Yeah.
could come out and say, "Hey, look, I listen. These people said this, and those people said that, and
Yep.
so here's what the middle ground is."
Yeah.
But it's just like you're listening to the ABC nightly news who's quoting the New York Times. It's like, well,
Right.
the same people just saying the same things. I mean, there's no.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the thing. It's coming from the same bias. So you can't
Yeah.
really discern if that's just something that they're saying because it's useful, or if it's something because it actually is meaningful.
Yeah.
So it's tough.
Yeah. Well, and one place I have found pretty good is two of them actually. The Independent Voters Network, when it comes to things dealing with politics and all that,
Mhm.
they seem to kind of deal with both sides quite a bit, and they're focused on third parties too.
Yeah.
So they've been pretty interesting. And then what's the other one? It's actually a website more, News Nation. It's News Nation. Um, and it's kind of like a YouTube, but it's just all news. But it's very much, it seems to be very even keeled. They don't, it's what I would term what news used to be, where they would
Yeah.
try and tell both sides of the story. And so I don't know if they'll succeed because I don't know if everybody wants to hear both sides of the story. But I go to that and listen to some of their reporting.
I'll
Uh,
check that out because I haven't actually listened to that. I've heard
yeah,
of it, but I've never actually
News
listened to it.
Nation. You can download it from it's actually like I said, it's like YouTube. It's basically like a broadcast news, but it's not it's not an actual network per se, but they call it News Nation. So,
Yeah.
anyways, well, that's good. Like I said, I'm thinking maybe this is crazy, but maybe speaking of social media, we do have a Facebook page, um, just to post things because hey, at the end of the day, it's not going away, and to get the
Yeah.
word out, that's you know that
Gotta try.
there's few places you can do that, and right now it's social media. Um, but maybe we just start our little list of, hey, if a third party really comes into existence, here's some things that would be really great that they focus their platform on, just real
Mhm.
simple kinds of things. And we just kind of start listening them out because I think there's so many things that people can agree to. It can be extreme on either side and just start them as little small steps.
Yeah, well, as I say, I would encourage people too, if you're listening to this, you're listening to this podcast and, you feel like you have something to say, go out and try and find a way to say it because who
Yeah.
knows, maybe one of our listeners out there will get inspired by what we're saying and they'll be the one that figures out, hey, this is how you get around, the corporate media. This is how you get a message out.
Yep.
And maybe that person, whoever that person may be, may make a difference. Again, one of the things that I'll talk about endlessly on this podcast and I talk about in my life is that great ideas can come from anywhere. It's kind of the Ratatouille philosophy, right? Which
Hey,
I think is a great movie, by the way. And
it is.
so
I
it's
just
like,
watched that.
yeah, it's great. It's
It's a
it's
great
like
movie.
it's the true American, story is really what it is.
Yeah.
But it's the idea that there's so many people that have such a diversity of ideas. Who's to say which one is going to be the one that catches on or somebody really falls in love with or changes the world? And so, even if you're a person like me, who's about as disconnected from everything as anyone could possibly get, maybe something that I say inspires somebody. So that's what I'm trying. I'm
Right.
trying to do something to, you know, go down a road that's a little bit different. And as I say, people just need to be open to that. They need to hear that, hey, there's a lot of us out here who are open to the ideas of trying something a little bit different. In fact, we need something different.
Right.
And hopefully that starts rolling and catches fire and, third parties can grow up around that.
Yeah. Well, and the irony of it, there's a lot of independent voters out there. I mean, and it's just a matter of all of them opening their voices and
Yeah.
minds, to your point, to spread the word because there's the third party or independent voter, um, you know, they got a big voice. They're just not
Yeah.
being heard.
Yeah. But I
That's
guess what I would say, I was going to say, what I'd say to people though is don't be afraid to vote third party. When the
no,
Democrats and the Republicans come around and tell you you're throwing your vote away or you're being stupid,
right.
you're not. You're
No,
not. What you're
no,
doing is you're starting something better. You
exactly.
know, throwing your vote away is voting for the same people to do the same things that doesn't work.
Yep.
Voting to try to start something new, even if it's a small step, is not throwing your vote away.
No,
Don't be afraid to vote for third parties.
no, totally agree. And yeah, it, they've really kind of honed that message about throwing your vote away really well.
Yeah,
Where they have scared a lot of people, and it's like that's exactly what they want to do. And
right. They want you to be afraid.
right, and I think it's even starting to dawn on some of the Democrats and Republicans both, particularly when they came out with this latest poll. And I take polls with a grain of salt, anyways, because
Yeah,
usually they're wrong, anyways. But it gives the both sides a reason to talk about. Well, we need to do this, we need to do that. But every time I hear that now, I hear very consistently that whether it's they're representing the Republican side or the Democrat side, it's well, we need to do this, that, and the other thing to address the independent voters. And because it's such a swing now and
yeah,
it can be a swing. And it's like now we just need to formalize it into okay, it rather than making it sort of well, we'll see what happens. Make it a little more formal. That's what a third party can help do, kind of shape it a little bit and really focus on hey, here's some key, relatively simple things that we should be able to do because the vast majority of people want it done,
right.
period.
Yep.
I mean,
But
it's
they,
not
but as they say, the two parties are so locked into their, ideological stances that moderating a position is like next to impossible. At least that's the
no.
way it seems. I mean, I haven't seen them do it yet. They just seem to get worse and worse. So
Yep.
who knows? But
No.
I mean, again, I guess I'll just hammer it home for one last time on this episode. Don't be afraid. Don't let people tell you that if you vote for a third party, it's going to create some terrible outcome. Oh my God, if you vote for, a third party, you're going to elect Trump. Oh my God, if you vote for a third party, you're going to elect, Biden.
Right. Right.
So what? Get the
Yeah,
third party started so that you don't have the choice between Trump and Biden in the future. You
exactly.
know, for God's sakes, we can't keep going through this and having these same two, you know, awful choices.
Yep.
So don't be afraid. Be willing
Yep.
to vote for a third party.
That I totally agree. Totally agree on. And I think obviously more and more people are starting to get that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like the people are so unhappy. And I know we get so focused on presidential politics, and in the big scheme of things, that has the least impact on a lot of what we do anyways. But
Yeah.
it gets the attention. And
Yeah.
so it's like,
But I was gonna say it's
worry about your local congressperson, worry about your
yeah.
local state legislature, worry about your city council, whatever.
Yeah.
That's where you're going to have most impact anyways. And if
The
you
one thing I would
vote
the
for
one thing I would say
independent for a
about
president, who cares?
yeah. Well, I was just gonna say the one thing I would say about the federal level politics and then voting for president is that's what's used as a cudgel to, a lot of the time,
Yep.
try and shoo away the third party. Oh, look, if you start this third party, you're going to
Right.
end up with Trump.
Yeah.
You're going to end up with Biden if you start a third party.
Yeah.
Something bad's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so, because people are focused on that, and that is generally what they look like. I mean, nobody says, oh, if you start a third party, the fifth district city council guy in your city is going
Right.
to, I mean, that's not the direction it goes.
No.
So again, to be able to focus on the local stuff, you need to get past the idea that somehow creating something new is going to throw the
Right.
world into some horrible chaos. And then once you can get the ball rolling, then you can start having people for local offices and other things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. I totally agree. All right. No, that's good. Like it. So, hey, we're getting better. If we begin now, we're only 10 minutes over time. So, anyway,
Guess we'll wrap it up then.
yeah, exactly. No, well, I said I do want to start. I think just starting this little list, I think we're coming up with at least just some thought starters for people. And we probably should add that one to it. Don't worry about voting for a third party. It's not gonna,
Yeah, don't be afraid.
don't be afraid, because you got to start somewhere,
Yeah.
you know,
And better to start now than
right? Before it's
I
really
mean,
too
I
late.
don't yeah, we should have started this 30 years ago. I
Absolutely.
mean,
Yep.
but you got to get what you can get. So let's start it now.
Yep. All right, man. All right. Well, I'll be heading home tomorrow, so we'll be
Safe
back.
travels and welcome back to Vista.